out there.
All right. I think we are live. This is episode number 3 of Me and My Father's podcast, still unnamed. We need to get on that, I guess. But we're coming to you on the 20th of April, 2020. It's been about a week. We've been really busy doing stuff. I've had a lot of schoolwork going on. But as hard as it is to be busy right now, somehow we're managing. But yeah.
So, hey, by the way, like what you said, Nicholas, those that are watching, or maybe you're watching this afterwards, give us some ideas. Let's interact some. Give us some ideas of what we should call it. We've honestly, I think, been too busy to even think about it, but we do want to get a name sooner rather than later, something to be able to say other than Shane and Nicholas's podcast.
Yeah.
So, give us some thoughts. So, yeah, Nicholas, what do you want to start out talking about?
There's a lot of stuff, right? Yeah. Maybe it's good that we've taken a week off because there hasn't been a ton going on. But what is going on is that today was supposed to be the first day that certain businesses could reopen in our area of Texas. So you were out today. Did you see any more people out or anything else open?
I was in downtown Granbury briefly, and I actually had to walk across the street to a restaurant. And by the way, I'm going to say that restaurant was filling the filling station. So, and this dovetails right in real quick to answering your question. So, no, it actually looked pretty dead, honestly. And I was down there from about, 6 to 7 or so. And there's a lot of background noise for something's going on there. But the filling station was open, and they're taking orders basically curbside over the phone and Grubhub, and they said it's been really slow a lot. So if you're in Hood County, I would say go check them out, order something,
Yeah, for sure.
Cook out one night and go there. But yeah, it actually seemed pretty dead today, but honestly don't know. I don't know how this actually went. I mean, it was the first day, supposedly. I listened to, and I know you probably did too, Nicholas, the governor's, a lot of background noise.
Hold on.
Yeah, guys and gals, be patient with us. We're working through some technical difficulties there. So, yeah, go ahead, Nick. I
was out on Friday, and not a whole lot was supposed to be open Friday. I mean, things were still doing drive-through. I just went through a drive-through in Granbury, but a ton of people out on the road. So, I mean, I don't know necessarily where everyone's going, but I mean, there was a lot of people out and doing something. So
where
maybe
they are
it was
going?
just...
Yeah, to your point, where they are going, because I was out on Friday as well, and where they've been going, honestly, is Home Depot and Lowe's and Walmart.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Those places have already all been open, but when I did go to Lowe's and Home Depot, for that matter, on Saturday, it was crazy how many people were there. But I think that's honestly been the norm for the last couple of weeks because they're considered essential businesses. So people are, been going there, all the time. So
yeah, I mean, with everyone stuck inside, a lot of people, I'm sure, are doing projects. I know we are. We're working on projects in and around the house, a couple of various things, but with everyone stuck inside, I'm sure that's why a lot of people are there. But to your point, I was just across the road from Home Depot, and yeah, it was packed. It was insane. So I'm curious to see their numbers.
Yeah, I'm sure they're doing perfectly fine for the most part. I mean, the only thing that's hurting them from normal is most of them are closing at 6 or 7. Lowe's is actually open an hour later here in Granbury than Home Depot, so they're closing down early so they can clean things up. So they're losing some revenue there, but they're certainly not hurting like a lot of the other businesses would be.
Yeah.
So one of the things related to that, maybe we'll talk about briefly, and I think Nicholas is in the same spot as me. I've been so busy, I've not had as much of an opportunity to look things up or look at the news. But I don't know what that background noise is,
Hmm.
but we're just going to have to deal with it. I did hear today that South Carolina was, pushing.
Is it that bad? Hold on.
Yeah.
Here, keep going.
Yeah, that South Carolina basically had decided to kind of open up business. One of the things that even here in Texas that was supposed to be one of the criteria, I believe, is that 14 days of kind of decreasing cases.
All right, we'll try that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Maybe that's better.
Okay.
That was some kind of weird noise, background noise.
Yeah.
I know it's coming from the other end for some reason. But anyway, so different states are kind of taking their own path. I think some of the states where maybe they're, have.
Is it?
Can you
Okay,
hear that on your end?
No, I can't hear anything. Hold on. You keep going. I'm gonna try something.
Okay, so I'm just curious if those that are on, who's been watching consistently the task force, with President Trump and Vice President Pence and so forth and so on. So I've been trying to watch those most of the days, but today I watched most of it today. But tell us in the comments what you're thinking. I know a lot of people. My sense is in Texas, and I can speak certainly for Texas and Hood County for that matter. I think a lot of people are getting restless with regards to wanting to have the freedom to leave their home if they choose to, and those that are not ready to leave the home, obviously they should have that right as well. But I know a lot of people are, I think they're feeling it's been time enough, and it's time for them to have at least the freedom to move around. And to that end, I don't know any of the details. I haven't really read or watched any of the specific reports about it, but I know over the weekend there was basically a protest or a demonstration, whatever you want to call it, a gathering in Austin with a number of people that were like, okay, it's time to let us do our own thing now. And I think that was the other thing that I heard somewhat related to that was, I know a lot of local municipalities in Texas, if you will, or counties were somewhat surprised that the governor didn't, I guess, specifically and openly give more authority at the local level than he did. So, and I think one of the questions really is, how much authority do they have, whether it was given to them or not? So that's an interesting question to be asked. So if anyone's actually on right now, would love to see your comments. And one other thing about that, we're not actually able to see your comments right now. So please just interact, and we'll get back to you on questions that you may have once we get this thing squared away a little bit better and move this to an actual page, Facebook page, instead of a profile. We'll actually be able to see questions. We'll actually be able to highlight people's questions, answer them, that type of thing. So we're looking to continue to improve this. I think our audio has gotten better as well. So whatever you did, Nicholas, that was good.
Yeah, I just switched out headphones, so I hope this is better.
Okay.
Yeah, these are wireless.
All right. So I've been covering for you. So what do you got to say?
What were you talking about?
I was talking about people getting the sense that people, well, not a sense. I know that people are getting restless. They want to be able to have at least the freedom to be able to go about their business. I think that a lot of people are like, we understand. Those people that understand, in my mind, social distancing are going to continue to do their best to do that. Those that ignore it are going to ignore it anyway. So, I mean, we can't do much about that. So those people that are conscious about everything, they're ready to get back out in the world.
Yeah, I think what a lot of people are worried about right now is, what people have been worried about this whole time is that, it can induce maybe a lot of fear. Even if maybe it's the right thing to be staying inside, a lot of people might just feel the urge that they need to be able to get out, and they feel kind of trapped. And whether, we kind of saw this at the beginning when the government, a lot of people were just saying, hey, we're just, going to ask everyone to stay inside for right now. And it didn't seem like that big of a problem. But then, as soon as you started seeing these mandates coming out, then you started to see people get more and more restless, like you said. So I think it does have to do something with the mandate aspect of the fact that at this point, a lot of people are being told to stay inside versus asked. And I think that we're unique in our country in the sense that if we're asked to do something, I think we can have good faith that more or less it's going to be followed. And also we've talked about this before, but for our liberties to be maintained a little bit, at some point we are going to have to sacrifice a little bit of the security versus if we just had to, lock people in their houses.
Sure. Right. Unless we can be given, in my mind, unless we can be given a firm understanding in science that would suggest that this is going to be maybe like the flu and be seasonal, I think that people are going to, and they're there, which is to say, hey, don't know whether this is going to be a season or not. So since I've already been basically cooped up in my house for a month, I'm ready to get out. And if I contract the virus, then I'll contract the virus. This is something we've talked about, I think, in both episodes. I think maybe don't want to get super detailed about it, but I think most people that think about liberty, obviously with liberty comes a certain amount of risk in anything, whether that's the topic of liberty and being able to protect yourself, or if that is liberty and the ability to come and go and as you please with that. In an epidemic like this, obviously there's certain risk. And what I think is important to understand, and what I think maybe some people don't because of some of the comments I read on Facebook, is there are those that I think, Nicholas, you hit on the head, that are talking about, in essence, they're operating under fear because they're saying, well, if everybody getting out, then basically I'm going to get sick. Well, maybe, and it's not that we don't care about that, but again, with freedom, then you can choose to continue to stay at home. I mean, that,
Sure.
that's the brutal honesty about it. In other words, part of liberty and freedom is to say, yes, there is a collective concern that we should have, but we have to trust that people with liberty are going to do their part to do that, and those that don't, that's a part of freedom as well. So
yeah, it's an interesting topic because you have people saying like, oh, the quarantine's not doing anything. It hasn't really helped. The numbers haven't been as high as expected. The problem with that, it's actually a really funny logic, kind of paradox here, because there's no counterfactual to compare it to. So you can't look at it and say, this is what it would have been if we hadn't quarantined, because you can't know that because we did. But the issue is, if the numbers are low, people that were in support of the quarantine are going to say, hey, look, the numbers were low because we quarantined. And people that were against the quarantine are going to say the numbers are way lower than you thought. So that means that we did all this for nothing because this thing wasn't even that bad. So the problem is that for a lot of people who, maybe are torn one way or the other, whether they, are kind of on the fence of whether we need to open this thing back up or continue what we've been doing, is that if you're concerned about the data, it's really, really hard to compare these things because there's like I said, there's no counterfactual. You can't look at how it would have been if we hadn't been doing this.
Right.
And if you're looking at the now, you say, oh, there hasn't been as many cases as we originally projected. Is that because we've been quarantined, or is that because this disease in and of itself is not as bad as we thought? So it's a really difficult decision.
Right. And I think, and that's a really good point. And I think another thing related to that in my mind is it's also true that it's hard to compare. You got different densities, right? You got Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, San Antonio, Austin. You really can't compare those to, for example, to Granbury or Tolar or Lipan or Bluffdale. Where the density of our population is smaller. That's why a lot of us live here. We like that, and so that's another factor that would have to be weighed in if we were going to do anything. And I would say, again, I'm really going to go back to what I said earlier. The fact, or those difficulties being what they are, then I think the default position, quite honestly, is then to give people back their choice and their liberties.
Right.
And then things are just going to happen the way they're going to happen. And then I guess we can react again. And that's even what, at a federal level, what I think they're preparing for when they say we're going to open up the economy again. If you listen, they're also talking about having things in place to react to the unfortunate potential of people starting to get sick again.
Right. So at the beginning of this whole thing, we all heard the phrase, flatten the curve, which people are kind of arguing there's two different camps. You have, oh, well, the curve has been flattened. Now we can go back, or we can't go back because the curve is flattening. That means we're doing what we need to be doing, and we need to continue to do that. Again, it's a really difficult balancing act, because the reason you flatten the curve, which, I mean, mathematically speaking, if you flatten the curve, it's still the same amount of cases just spread out over a larger, space of time, which is, you hear people talking about not overloading the medical system, which is absolutely true. What we're doing with this quarantine, and what I think maybe some people might be losing sight of, is the fact that we did this so that we could prepare for the inevitable of when we do have to go back to our everyday lives, that when those cases come, inevitably, we're more prepared in our system, and we've, diluted the surge. So if you think about it, instead of maybe a curve like math, if you think about it like a wave, instead of having a big tidal wave, which is harder to take on as far as all at once, we've spread out the same amount of water, quote unquote, over a longer period of time, so that our flood walls, our metaphorical flood walls of our hospital system don't get overrun. Right. But at the end of the day, there's the same amount. It's like if you're spreading out the curve of a tsunami, trying to flatten it, you use that time to build a higher wall, instead of saying, oh, look, it's starting to flatten, we're good now. But you have to have built that infrastructure in the meantime, because we're buying time for the inevitable fact that there are going to be those cases.
Right. So I want to maybe transition to something for a minute that's related, but a different topic, or maybe something that's going to be I think, an inevitable consequence of this as well. It's very possible, and Nicholas, we've talked about this a little bit too, but I think it's very possible that we are, that one of the things we're going to see is at least some form of inflation. I know that, there's this concept of hyperinflation. I don't know that we'll reach that. I certainly hope not. But I think with the stimulus and those other things, and the fact that even another stimulus maybe coming out, I heard this too today, or it was yesterday. I actually saw someone post, in a sense, asking a question: would you rather have $2,000 a month, or have your mortgage or rent basically paid for the foreseeable future? I guess there's and this shows I'm out of the know in some instances, and I'll admit that, but I guess there's another stimulus floating around, which would be to give someone $2,000 a month. Now, I don't know who would qualify, all of those kind of things, but what I do know, I think the new number is something like 16 million people have applied for unemployment.
Yeah.
So, we do actually have a few people on. I'd love for those that are on to comment. Do you think we're headed for inflation? What do you think this is going to do to our economy? I heard it as well that oil, and part of this is because of futures and that type of thing, but oil is actually negative per barrel right now. It's negative, that's crazy. I don't know, $5 a barrel. And part of that's because big companies like Exxon and those, even though they produce, they also buy oil for their gas stations and various other things. And so they buy oil futures to try to flatten out, talking about curves, to flatten out their own curve so that they can know and have a consistent price to pay for it. So imagine that they have all these futures to buy a barrel at $90, let's say, a barrel. And so they still got to, that still has an impact, because now it's actually negative. So they're losing money, at least some money, on that kind of transaction. Now they can actually buy other futures. And I'll be done. But the other interesting thing about that, the futures a month from now are $28 a barrel. So it's a really interesting kind of thing that obviously can get really technical, but I think the bottom line is it's going to impact our economy in a negative way at some point in the future,
Yeah,
until we
it's
really
weird.
Think about, and I'm going to be done. Think about how long it's going to take to get 16 million people employed again. You don't just hire people overnight. Sure. And honestly, it's much easier on that scale to let people go than it is to bring them back on board, because we're talking about a spectrum of types of jobs, from fast food all the way up to executives and all kinds of things. So it's going to be an interesting thing. So what are your thoughts?
No, it's just comment on gas really fast. I mean, it's a really weird thing that we've seen all throughout, and I remember, when I was a lot younger, gas was $4 plus. And, over the past couple of years, it's gone down, but then we've seen employment numbers drop. So it's really weird, the correlation that gas price has with our economy. And it's a really complicated situation where, in a time of economic crisis, which I think at this point most would agree that we're at least, maybe not in a full recession, but maybe just a downturn, and then hopefully we'll come out of it. So we're not so much in a depression, just more of a short-term business cycle, as they're popularly known. But it's really strange because we see, like I said, in that sort of time, gas prices are really low, which for a lot of people driving right now, if you're driving, that seems like a good thing. But right now, 16 million people are out of the job. But when gas is up, when gas is up in prices, it's sometimes an indicator that we're doing well. So, but again, for the people driving on the road, that might not seem like such a good thing. And you say, oh, the economy is good, I'm having to pay $4 a tank, $4 a gallon to fill up my tank of gas. So it's strange.
It's a study in economics that, and this is not a criticism, but that most people don't do. And I've even struggled with just thought, when you think of it just purely as a consumer, to think that when gas prices, relatively speaking, are higher, that the economy is doing better. But I think generally speaking, if you really go into the science in a sense of economics, it's proven to many extents that when gas is higher, that it does stimulate the economy in a lot of different ways that, as consumers, as those just putting gas in our car, don't think about. So, I mean, anyway, it's just an interesting thought.
Because how many millions of people are employed by the oil and gas industry? I mean, millions of people. So,
and they spend money.
For sure. I mean, for the people driving, which is a lot of people. I mean, paying an extra $1 or $2 for your gas might seem like, this huge thing that we don't want to do, but there are millions of people that are able to have a job because of the price of gas is at the level it is. But right now, millions of people are being laid off by these gas companies because the prices are so low right now. It's a really interesting correlation.
And arguably, people are driving less, so it doesn't even help the consumer as much. And so,
except for the people that are going buying.
If people are on the road more, let's just talk just briefly. They're stopping at a place to eat more. They're if they're driving to go on vacations and stuff, they're stopping halfway to maybe stay at a hotel. All the things. So I mean, that adds up if you think about it. And so I'm not necessarily pro or anti oil company. It's just a fact of the matter of what it drives our economy. So
it's one of those. Oh no,
finish your thought.
I'm not sure. But no, I was just going to say that it's one of those things that is just so fundamentally linked to our, economy and just society in general, at least in the modern age of, that's how we all get where we're going. So it's just one of those things that's always been linked. And I think at least for the foreseeable future will be. Now, maybe what we can start talking about is moving off of coronavirus, just transitioning from the gas topic. We could talk about electric cars and maybe how that will shift the link between gas and our economy away from being this huge thing that everyone's talking about. Oh, what's the price of oil per barrel today? It's not going to matter as much if half the people are driving electric.
Well, okay, I agree. And let's talk about this for a moment, because certainly a large portion of our consumption of oil is for fuel, but our economy, think about all the things that are still made out of plastic. So I mean, there's still going to be a big need for oil, but
right.
I think you bring up a valid point, and I will say, because it's an interesting topic that we've talked about a lot. I'm have kind of been anti-electric car, not so much because of because we need to keep our economy going with gas. It's because my experiences or my context is a Prius or something like that. And I don't take this, if you own a Prius, that's fine. But I mean, the electric cars I've had when I've rented them, you can literally feel them stop when you're at a red light, all those kind of crazy feeling things. But the exciting thing to me in one sense is with Tesla, and I'm sure Tesla's going to at some point have some competition. They're coming out with some electric cars that are competitive price-wise to a gas car, but also not only competitive price-wise, but competitive performance-wise, and not only competitive,
absolutely,
but arguably even better performance-wise. And then the only potential drawback, and that's even being overcome, is how far you can go on a single charge. So Nicholas has done a lot of thinking about this. So yeah, share some of your thoughts then, Nicholas.
No, I just think it's going to be something that I think we're going to realize is something that we need to invest more in. And I think, like you said, Tesla was definitely the start of the practical electric car. Before that, you had, the Chevy Volt, and like you mentioned, maybe the fully electric Prius, and among other cars that I think, weren't really a viable option for an everyday person. But Tesla came out, and now you see it being one of the most popular cars in certain areas like California and more developed and urban areas, which leads to the infrastructure being a little bit better to support such, a fleet of vehicles and, just the public in general. But I think as we keep going, and you mentioned range, I think as battery technology gets more and more efficient and able, like you said, to produce more range, but also charge faster. That's a really important thing, which Tesla's doing a really good job on. It's going to be a really important, I think,
well, I don't know if we're having Nicholas just froze up. I don't know if you can see me or not, and there is a delay. So I don't even know if he's talking. So let's wait just a few minutes, or I'll just keep talking. As Nicholas was saying, until I hear him come back on, I think the electric car industry will also, and not only cars, but trucks and that type of thing, will certainly pick up when they catch up with Europe with regards to the traditional diesel truck that can continue to that can go long miles on that. Nicholas, you back?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened. So I was kind of filling in, and what I'd like to hear you talk about, Nicholas, maybe share your opinion. And I was saying to those that are listening, one of the things that I think will ultimately see the electric transportation, I'll use that term for a moment, is when we also have the equivalent of diesel trucks that can, go across the country and deliver goods and services, on an electrical platform as well, because that will be huge. Sure. I think.
Right. So you're like big trucking, 18-wheeler type.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, Tesla right now is pretty much, there's a few like boutique companies, and you always see the electric car companies, go through some sort of funding phase where it's all hyped up and then they eventually fade out. There's really very few viable electric only companies. One of them, besides Tesla, is Rivian, and they make, like akin to a Ford F-150. They're going to be coming out with that soon. So as far as trucks, there's that. But as far as big commercial trucks, Tesla's really the only big company that's looking to do that, because like you said, I think they do realize the market that's there for that, because these vehicles, when they're at the level they need to be, will be much more cost efficient for companies. And also they can carry much larger loads, which is, again, it's good for a company as far as keeping costs down. But unfortunately, what that means for some people is that they might lose their job. Trucking is a really big part of a lot of people's, it's a large part of the economy, and a lot of people are employed in that industry. And with Tesla specifically, a lot of what they do is also work in automation. And so they're not necessarily looking to be able to put a bunch of drivers out of the job. But again, for a company, if they can do that, which it's a long way down the road, of course, you're always going to have, not always, but for at least a foreseeable future, you're always going to have someone in a truck, whether it's they're driving it or not, or just supervising a machine. But that is a really big industry.
You bring up another point, and I think we need to move on, honestly. But this whole idea of assisted driving or automated driving or autonomous driving, a lot of different names. I mean, literally, in some cases, there's not even in the future a person in it. That may sound completely futuristic, but some of these companies are getting very, very close, and then it just requires infrastructure, something
and
like
legislation.
Legislation, something like 5G, and that's another big enabling technology that's coming out. There's obviously some concerns about that technology in some ways, but not that that's not important, but setting that aside for a moment, 5G is, as a technology at least, is going to completely revolutionize a number of things. And let's just be honest, from an investment perspective, if anyone is interested in, the next Google, the next Amazon, the next whatever, there are probably some companies, either existing companies or emerging companies, that are one way or another involved in 5G. And that's going to be probably a premier investment for those that
if I can interject really fast on that, I think you're mentioning 5G. It's, again, like you said, it's going to be very revolutionary in a lot of ways. But again, if maybe we can talk about it for really quick and then move on, because it does link to something we've talked about before. But as we start to see the goal of maybe transportation moving towards automation, so humans not behind the wheel, a computer driving, what you're going to inevitably end up seeing, if that becomes the goal, is interconnected vehicles and methods of transport across, everything, multi-platform, multi-brands. They're all, I think what we're going to end up seeing eventually is some sort of industry standard that's either, a government regulated thing or just something that these companies agree to, so that these vehicles can communicate with each other. Because it's a lot easier if every car knows where every car is. It's a lot easier to drive. So that again segues in really quick, and then I'll let you say what you're going to say. It segues really fast again into what we've talked about before. We're plenty with this coronavirus, is that, are we willing to give up the privacy of computers knowing where our vehicles are 24/7, so that we don't have to drive on the highway in the morning?
Maybe not our personal vehicles, but there's ways to potentially. There's always going to be trust issues with that. If there's ways to abstract to a certain extent some of the personal information about it, maybe. And so maybe what I was going to say, taking it away from the personal level, because I think that's going to take longer, but let's talk about the commercial or industrial applications. Imagine for a moment, I'll just use the term a cooperative, where Ryder, UPS, FedEx, whatever, all the different companies, the known companies that ship. Imagine a scenario where, because there is still, even with maybe the best battery technology, a certain range. So imagine a situation where an automated truck, if it's still even truck, because we still have highways that we could use, drives 500 miles, and then there's dispatched another truck waiting, and they automatically put the trailer on the new truck, and it goes the next 500 miles that it needs to go, fully automated with computers, so that it knows the right time to dispatch it, all of that. It's within a 10-mile range. I mean, the fact of the matter is, it sounds futuristic, but it honestly, and I know people can be concerned about job loss, but think about the new jobs, honestly, if you talk that through, that would create. Now, it changes some of those jobs from those that are maybe not considered as technical. I don't know the right term to use, whatever, but people are going to have to transition to maybe things where they have to learn a new skill, but jobs don't end when you have computers necessarily. They transition because there are still people that need to make sure that those computers are running properly, that their safety measures are constantly monitored. All the checks and balances that would still need to be involved in something like that to protect other people that are on the highways, because unless you're going to have a dedicated road, you still have to protect people that are out there driving. I mean, people are going to want to go somewhere. So, yeah.
No, yeah, I think you bring up, a good point. What's going to end up happening is that there's going to become a whole new sector of just, like you said, jobs created around how to integrate automated systems into, things that have always been the case. It's always only been people driving on the roads, but like you said, whether it's an automated lane where vehicles, and again, if it's an automated vehicle, if they're separate by themselves, human error is not an issue. And the reason we have speed limits is because of human error. So if you have an automated lane where it's only automated vehicles, again, you talk about efficiency in trucking and in transportation, the faster you can go, the cheaper it is, really.
Sure.
So,
well, human error, just to be clear though, right? Human error would still have an impact, but it wouldn't have an impact on the safety of other individuals if you had a dedicated lane. I mean, human error can still cause it to crash or hit the other unit waiting to receive it, those kind of things. But again, those are going to be probably minimized because of technology. But anyway, all the things like what happens if the electricity gets cut off, they're going to have to put in those types of checks and balances.
Right. No, for sure. And I think as far as people it's obviously a very valid concern, but I think what people don't realize is when considering, self-driving, quote unquote, or automated vehicles, is that the level of error is so much lower. Like if you talk about, on the roads today, how many wrecks are there just because a human makes a stupid choice? They're constantly present, whereas a computer might make a mistake, but for every 100,000 times, a computer drives on the road, it crashes once, and then I don't even know the statistic, but I'm sure less than every 1,000 times a car is on the road, it crashes in the hands of a human, obviously. So if you look at the overall numbers, it might be a little more reflective of reality. I don't know.
Well, and maybe our progression is, again, autonomous driving where a human can take over control if they choose to. Sure. Maybe that's, in other words, a progressive thing until, for one, there's proof, trust in the technology, that type of thing. And I don't know what other people think, but I think, honestly, I would may never actually choose to use it, but I think I would, if I'm physically in an automobile, I would want to have the ability to take over control in a situation if I felt I needed to, or if I absolutely needed to. I mean, I think that's just at least for me, we're all different, right? Some people are going to be probably completely fine, would even be fine with going to sleep. Literally on the same highway that we drive today, they might be comfortable going to sleep as they drive from here to Florida, from Texas to Florida for 12 hours. They might just sleep. And that would be awesome in one sense, right? You literally in your own car with your bags, everything you're going to take with you, and the car's driving you. So purely from a convenience perspective, if I'm from a moment able to say I completely trust it, then it's awesome at that level. It sounds really cool. But so we're going to have to obviously introduce some of these technologies slowly, so people will gain trust in them, trust them, that type of thing. And I guess, we're going to need infrastructure. That's going to probably have to be a combination of both government and private enterprise. It's probably going to require and take both in order to do it and make it a reality. I mean, I don't think anyone is not aware of the fact that, it's changing the subject a little bit, right? But Amazon has been experimenting with delivering packages with drones and, all kinds of things. So and I'm going to end my part of this part of the discussion by just saying, I completely understand that a lot of people, when they think about these kind of things, are concerned about losing their jobs. I get it. I mean, lots of skilled jobs as well, I think over time are going to disappear. Jobs are not going to disappear, but a particular job is going to disappear. The person that, and this is just the fact of the reality of technology, the person that works for a company that's paying invoices and looking at them, making sure everything is the way it needs to be, that job is on its way out, not because that person is unimportant or not because that job is not unimportant, but because the reality of companies are going to want to use this technology to save money, to actually reduce the amount of error, to more quickly pay, more quickly receive payment. All of those kind of things is driving those kind of decisions. And that's only one of probably easily 20 types of jobs that are even high paying, considered high skilled jobs that are going to disappear in 5 to 10 years from now, if not sooner. So this is actually, I would say, a encouragement to anyone that's listening to this, either live or later. I would encourage you to be looking, depending on what you do for a living, considering what other kind of skills you can gain.
Yeah, it's crazy though, because I'm curious what you think about what does happen. Do you think it's going to be a gradual change, or do you think there's going to be a day where hundreds of thousands of people are laid off because a company just brings in a machine that they are like, all right, this is what we're doing, right, or a vehicle that replaces hundreds of thousands of drivers?
I don't. It could play out a different way, but here's what I think, to answer your question, based upon just how quote unquote corporate America has for the last 30 years that I've been in it, and even before then, if you look at history, generally speaking, we're making I'm going to make some general statements here, but the companies that are going to be doing this, they're not going to come out and tell their employees, hey, we're replacing your job. We intend on replacing your job in 5 years. That's never, in my experience, been the way it works. But the signs are there for those that are willing to be, I guess, aware and not have their head in the sand. And I don't mean that to be mean, but yes, I think it's going to, for some people, it's going to seem that it just literally happened overnight, but it's not going to, because the signs are going to be there. It's first going to be, it's going to slowly start, but then all of a sudden it's just going to happen at some point overnight. But like most things, it's just like, gaining weight, right? You don't gain weight overnight, but at some point you wake up and you're like, how am I 20 pounds heavier? It seems like it was overnight, but it wasn't. So I don't think companies, generally speaking, are going to broadcast that, hey, we intend on reducing our workforce by 50%, for example, or whatever the percentage would be. And depending on the company and the job role, I think some of these companies will be able to drastically reduce their workforce, maybe completely within the company. And those people might have to go to a completely different industry. And then other companies, they will be able to transition those people, or a large portion of those people, into something else. But that also, companies are in it to make money, and they're going to honestly expect their employees to be open to those new things. And actually, quite honestly, in many cases, whether it's fair or not, they're going to expect them to already be prepared in some ways.
Right.
People are going to get the opportunity, but they're going to have to jump on it and be willing, and in some cases already have spent the time on their own, with their own dime, if you will, and on their own time learning it, because that's the other thing. And then I'll be done. It's a long-winded answer, but my experience also over the last 20 years, and again, it's a generalization, but generally speaking, many companies spend less and less on training, but yet expect you to continue to actually perform at the same level or better, which what that really ultimately means is you've got to spend your own time and your own dime staying relevant in your job. I mean, that's just the bare facts. So,
Right. So I'm just curious, again, this is a very common example, and this actually happened a long time ago, not that long, I think a couple of years ago, when there was a real scare um, on, again, the trucking industry, that it was just in 10 years going to be completely gone.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a famous tweet, I don't know who it was, but just some heckler that was like, just learn to code,
Yeah.
to a trucker,
Sure.
So I'm curious what you say to someone that would say
Yeah.
that to someone, like, just learn to
Well,
code. I mean,
I think that's
obviously it's not
drastic.
that simple.
Well, right. That's drastic for number one. And coding is certainly a good skill, but let's be honest, the person that said that, I would, since we're talking generically, they may actually not be so smart themselves, because that's the other thing that's going to even drastically change is even some coders, depending on what they code, are going to be replaced as well, because with artificial intelligence and machine learning becoming more of a real thing, many things that required someone to code to write is basically going to be written itself in real time
Right.
as things are being discovered. So that's the first response I would say. That the second I would say is that's very drastic, and coding is certainly not the only thing in this new world, this new economy, this increase in use of technology. It's by no means the only thing that people could do. There's a lot of,
Right.
I think, a lot of jobs that are going to be needed to support this new way of certain things happening. And I also think, and then please share what you think. I think honestly, in one way or another, a truck going down a highway is still going to be around for, I think, quite a while. Now, whether the driver's actually driving it much, think about this for a moment. Okay, maybe you still want a human in the truck, because once it gets to its destination, as crazy as this may sound, there may need to be that personal touch. That's one thing, let's say. Another thing, imagine for a moment that truck driver has gained a new skill for that company, and the truck is designed in such a way that they can actually work while the truck is driving them 8 hours to the destination. Or maybe it's 6, because
Yeah.
once they get there, that 2 hours of FaceTime that's needed, they can do that. But the other 6, maybe they're monitoring the automated network. Maybe they're a part of the
Right.
skilled team that is monitoring this whole system. So I mean, you can be really creative, and if you think outside of the box, or what might seem out of the box for some people, there's a lot of potential.
Sure. I think you're completely correct. I think just what a lot of people seem to think, and not understandably, and if I were in the situation that maybe some of these people are in, I would be scared and unsure, especially
Sure.
considering you have these people that have been doing the same job for 20, 30, even sometimes 40 years, whether it's a manufacturing job or, trucking, or working in, some sort of service industry that could be replaced. That's all they've ever done. And at this point, it would be, to some people unthinkable, which, you do what you have to do. Sometimes you just have to go for it. But I think for a lot of people, it'd be really hard to say, oh, just do something else, just learn something
Sure.
new. Which again, I
Well,
feel lucky in the sense that, well, just yeah, hold on, and then I'll let you say what you're going to say. But I'm just saying, I think personally, I feel pretty blessed because I'm at the age where I'm able to decide for myself that I'm going to go into something that I can foresee as being, a big industry and a big field in this, very, inflection point in time, where things I think are going to shift dramatically. Maybe not immediately, but especially I can think, I'm in the situation where I can prepare myself for that because I am going into
sure.
school now. But you have people that are 50 years old that are, working a job that might not exist,
Hey, you're
and they
talking
have
about
to do
me.
something. Not
I'm
necessarily,
54.
but
I'm
maybe.
54, so watch out. No, what I was going to say, and thanks for that perspective, and I agree with you. The fact of the matter is, some people have been doing that, whatever that job is. Maybe that's making, let's think a lot of the trade, or what's kind of put in that category of trade. Maybe you've been making cabinets for 40 years and you love it, right? And that's great. Nothing wrong with loving that. So that's a tough spot to be put in, which is to say, hey, not only are you, unfortunately, maybe in this particular role, going to be maybe lose your job, or a lot of people are. Not only that, but it's something you love. And oh, by the way, if you want to continue to be employed, you're going to have to learn something new, and it may be drastic. It may not be. One thing I'll say, since I mentioned cabinets, I think in the most, me personally at least, I think in the most advanced technical society, there will always be a place for things that are made by hand, that have a certain amount of artistic value to it, because I certainly hope that people are going to continue to appreciate what humans can build. And I think there will always be, obviously, certain things that a computer can't do. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, a computer is only made by people. So, I mean, they're going to be able to do some pretty amazing things, but I have enough faith in the uniqueness of how we were created by God, honestly, that there's always going to be things that we're going to be able to uniquely do that a computer can't even come close to replicating. So, I love that. I love the fact as Christians that I believe that with my whole heart. So, I'm thankful that someone's like, wow, I love that. And some people are going to love it just because a computer didn't make it, even if it looked literally, think of the day literally that a computer could scan something, 3D scan it, every 5D scan, whatever the most advanced scanning would be. And a computer could literally make it exactly the same, at least to the human eye. But people are going to want to know that was made by human hands. At some point, it's actually going to be, you think about, it just came to my mind, probably going to be even more valuable. If you're an artist,
for sure,
a woodworker, whatever, in an economy and in a society where we're even more dependent on technology, maybe you make knives for a living, maybe you make axes, steel worker, that's going to be maybe even more valuable. So we don't have to think that every person is going to have to pivot and become more technical. Maybe not. Maybe actually someone, it can be the reverse as well. Maybe someone that's very technical says, hey, I'm actually in jeopardy of losing my job. I'm going to learn how to make knives. It may sound stupid, but I mean, there are people that make knives right now that sell for thousands of dollars a piece. Imagine in a world where convenience is everywhere, someone might be willing to pay $10,000 for that same knife. So,
yeah, I think there's always going to be, and like you mentioned, increasingly so, value that's put on something that's handmade, that's artisan, that's designed by a human and done by a human. It's going to be, I think it is going to be something that grows, and that maybe at some point it might even be the thing that's unattainable to the mass population. You're going to have, the higher up class are going to be the ones that can afford, handmade dinner table or whatever it is.
Sure, because if you're that guy, right? If you're that guy making it, generally speaking, you're going to make it for the, masses, or are you going to make it for the person that can spend a lot of money for it in that new economy, in that new world, probably for the person that can spend a lot more on it.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And so it's going to be a really interesting transition, because you have things that are handmade, that are more expensive, that are these, one of a kind masterpieces that people pay thousands and thousands of dollars for. But you also have, the square in Granbury, where someone makes, whatever it happens to be, that we can go and we can afford to a reasonable degree. But, but I think it's going to maybe transition out of that even more than it already is now, where the few people left that are, in those handcraft artisan trades it's really gonna pick up in price. Because think about how many people, how many resources go into making something as efficient as possible with the era of automation. How many resources that's going to take up versus someone putting time into making a table. It could take them so much longer, and so that it's going to just become worth more, I think.
Well, and imagine I guess to take this one step further in a positive way, I believe, imagine the person that, whatever it is, and I'll still use woodworking because I love woodworking, but it could be applied to a number of things. Imagine someone that does that on the side. They love to do it. They make a little money here and there. I mean, for them, it might actually become, it's the logical conclusion based on what we've been talking about. Maybe that actually becomes what they can do full-time for a living and actually make more money than they ever did before. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of ways to look at this in a positive way that's actually based on some form of reality. In other words, I don't think we're trying to just imagine something that's unimaginable just to be positive on it. I honestly think that there's a lot of ways to think about this positively. The one thing that is absolutely, in my mind, though, a non-negotiable, if you will, if anyone wants to make it in the economy that's coming, the future world that we've got, you're going to have to be willing to, I guess, adapt, to think about new things, just change. I mean, because things are going to change probably for most of us in one way or another, regardless of how skilled or unskilled you think what you currently do is.
So. Yeah. I think it's going to become, you have a large divide right now as far as what someone earns. You have a lot of people that are making very low and a lot of people that are making very high. And then you have a pretty decent amount in the middle. But what I think you see right now, and I think going into the future, is going to be an even larger gap in between, because like you said, you are going to have the people that are going to adapt, that are going to succeed. And then I think, unfortunately, whether it's, their own personal stubbornness or physically unable to in some way or another, there are people that are going to fall behind. And I think it's going to be a really interesting dynamic on how society in general is going to work to maybe help the people that aren't physically able to adapt, because you have someone who still has 10 years to retirement, but
right.
What are they going to do?
Well, and this may lead
60, 65, and they can't go out and maybe learn a completely new thing to do, because
probably especially if it's the computer skills, that type of thing. I mean, they may be able to lean in on something that they did as a hobby back when they were in their 40s or something like that, and resurrect that in a sense. But to your point, I think some of the more technical things at some point, and that point is different for all of us, because things like coding and other things require a certain amount of sharpness, and we all lose that at some point, or some of that, right? I mean, we're from the day we're born, we begin to degrade to a certain extent. That's just another way of the way that God created the world and us as human beings. But I would say that I just think that it's going to be a really interesting time. The other thing I think that this is going to bring up more often is, and we've talked about this briefly a little bit off and on, but I think this is probably going to introduce discussion about a universal basic employment. What is it? Whatever the term. Universal basic income. I'm not generally speaking for it, but whether I'm for it or not, I think that a lot of where we're going with this, and a lot of this placement is going to bring that topic to the forefront. With certain politicians, and some are going to push it, some are going to say that it should never be the case, regardless. So,
I mean, on that point, not to get super political, we can kind of move past it, and then I think wrap up, because we're getting close to an hour. But Andrew Yang, who was a Democratic presidential candidate, ran on his universal basic income policy that he wanted to implement, which I think was $1,000 for every American. Whether you agree with that or not, it was based around the fact that automation is going to take so many jobs. But I don't know. I think that just in that case, there would have to be some way to distinguish between those who are at a severe disadvantage to be able to adapt versus those who, you always are going to have the people who, it's commonly known as the free rider problem in economics, whether that's people that are, in general, just benefiting from the group, rather than contributing. So there was always going to be those people. And then there's always, unfortunately, going to be people that, one way or another physically are at a disadvantage and wouldn't be able to compete in a new job market like we might see in the near future. So there, that's always been the problem with any type of social welfare, is trying to figure out who, deserves it, quote unquote, and those who maybe just need to have a push to move past whatever it is in front of them.
Right.
So,
yeah, that's true. Maybe one other quick thing, just going to ask those that are still on live and those that maybe are rewatching this at whatever point you are. We'd like to encourage you to share this, either whether you're watching it live or whether you're watching on replay. Like it. We would really love comments. We do want to try to interact or to maybe talk about topics that you're interested in. We can talk certainly about anything. We won't be experts in everything, but we can certainly share our opinions and our thoughts. Me and Nicholas talk a lot of time about just a lot of different things. We share a lot of the same interest and share, I think, some of the same interest in some of the people that we listen to, and common people that comment, if you will, out there in the world on the things that are happening. So we will eventually, obviously, emerge from this coronavirus being a hot topic, but it is obviously right now still the single most, I think the thing impacting almost everyone, certainly at least in America for the most part right now. And it's still a moving target and something that's, happening dynamically. But I think we did venture into some other topics. So I thought those were really good. But yeah, share with us some of the things that interest you. And one other thing I'll say, for those that are friends of either mine or Nicholas, even if you're not friends, but if you're seeing this somehow or another, if you have a business that you would like to get a shout out, just let us know. I'm going to mention again, and then Nicholas, I want you to mention, I think I think which business that's about to open up again, but I'm going to give another shout out because I got to meet the owner today, and it was kind of crazy. So I didn't get to get his name because someone came by to actually get some food, but the filling station, which is on the Granbury Square, right across from Granbury Square Plaza or whatever it is, right there on the square, they're open till 8:00 at night, taking, curbside or doing curbside delivery, Grubhub, whatever. Want to give them a shout out. Consider getting your meal from them. They actually had shared with me, talked to him for about 15 minutes a day, maintaining distance, just so you know, but talking to him about how busy they are. And so it's kind of like feast or famine. It sometimes they're busy, sometimes they're not. So if you're looking for a place to get a meal and just you're tired of cooking in your house, then give them an opportunity to provide you some food. So Nick, why don't you close it out with the company their business that's opening up that you've been a part of?
So I'm super excited that Zev Martial Arts there in Granbury towards Acton is they're opening back up on May 1st. So I know it's been difficult for everyone because obviously with that, it's something that's really hard to replace when you're not in person. And they're doing the absolute best they can, and we thank them for it. But we're excited that they're going to be opening back up in just under 2 weeks. So that's
how are they going to do that? I mean, have they talked about how they're going to? I mean, is it just going to be literally like it used to be, or are they going to?
So they're opening up classes again, but they've extended the time in between each class, and they're going to, fully wipe down, all the mats, and they've just extended the time in between so that they can thoroughly clean everything. Okay. But other than that, it's pretty much business as normal. So we're all super excited, and they've, I guess, talked with different officials. So that's going to be, they've been given
the green light. They've been given.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome.
Originally, it wasn't going to be until like the third week of May, but they just recently told all of us that they were going to be opening up May 1st. So that's super exciting because it would have been 4 weeks and now 5 weeks. and now it's just under 2 weeks. So we're super excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, I guess we'll call it a night. So I just want to say thanks everyone for spending the time coming online. We know your time is valuable, so hopefully we've been able to just share some things that might interest you. So thanks again, and hope everyone has a great rest of the week. All right.
Yeah. See y'all.
Good night. Yeah. Bye.